Welcome to the Putback here on SNY.TV. I'm Ian Begley, SNY's NBA insider, and we're going to be here for the next 40 minutes or so talking Knicks and the NBA. And I have two great guests with me. I've got Kristian Winfield, Knicks beat writer, New York Daily News, also a protein bar chef. We'll touch on that a little bit later. And Jonathan Macri, the Dean of Knicks Film School. Thank you, gentlemen, for joining us. As always, we start off with the baseline. And the baseline today is what happened last night at the Garden, Oklahoma City, in town. Tight game, 40-point third quarter. Knicks coming back there. Couldn't make the plays late to seal this game. The guys were out on both sides. No Mitch Robinson, no Miles McBride for the Knicks, and obviously no Jalen Williams for the Thunder. And it had a heavyweight title fight feel, just in terms of both teams taking punches, giving punches, and then you saw what you saw at the end. Kristian, you asked Oklahoma City coach Mark Daigneault about what he'd take away, something extra from this game, and he kind of gave you two answers. What do you take away from what you saw last night?
First of all, credit to the Knicks for coming out. I feel like this is one of the first times all season where there's been good vibes after a loss. Correct me if I'm wrong, Ian. This is a team that came out and actually fought and put their best foot forward. And if a couple foul calls maybe go their way, we're talking about the Knicks maybe having one. Imagine if Shea picks up foul number 3 with three or so minutes left in the first quarter. Completely changes the game in the favor of the Knicks. But we won't make excuses, right? OKC won the game down the.
We might have lost. We did lose Kristian. Kristian, I hope we get you back. So to that point, John, obviously Mike Brown was involved in the foul stuff, and I don't know how much you want to get into that, but just generally your takeaway after that game based on what you saw.
I actually have a theory. I think the NBA officials heard Kristian bring up that third foul that wasn't called, and they cut his feed. So we'll have to, you can investigate that actually. I thought it was good that he said that it was the most maybe high vibes or whatever it was after a loss, because I felt the same way just doing the post game, hearing from fans. I think in a season that has been very frustrating, not that they've lost to good teams. We know that was a big problem last year, but it was how they lost and how they looked in some of the games. Obviously, the most notable ones came against Detroit, but you could point to a couple other losses, and including losses against really bad teams, like the Martin Luther King Day disaster, as I've referred to it, against the Dallas Mavericks, where they just kind of didn't show up. So for them to give you 48 minutes of top-notch effort, and I thought top-notch execution, if you're just looking at how they went about their business against this Thunder team. Obviously, part of execution is the shots going down. That's the one thing that didn't happen. But again, I think if you're just looking as a Knicks fan or someone who's interested in how far this team might go this year, the fact that this was a 3-point game, had shots to win it at the end. Obviously, we know there was some stuff with the refs. Jalen Brunson, I think it was Jalen Brunson, Josh Hart, and Mikal Bridges and OG Anunoby combined to shoot 33% from the field. Like, the Thunder are an excellent defense, or the best defense we've seen in some time. Don't get me wrong, but I think even considering how good their defense is, I think you would normally expect to see the Knicks shoot a little bit better than that. So I came out of it very encouraged.
Yeah, I think that even that third quarter, Jalen Brunson goes out, and then the Knicks cut the lead to 6 with him off the floor. He comes back, hits a couple threes, and they're right back in there. It did seem like before he went out that the rope was not being let go, but it seemed like the Thunder were poised to pull away. Knicks obviously did not let that happen. They lost to the Thunder. They have not beat the Thunder, I should say, since December 2017 at Madison Square Garden. Just games at Madison Square Garden. I believe that was Michael Beasley, Courtney Lee, that era. That was the last time they beat the Thunder. Lance Thomas, absolutely. Last time they've done that at home. And, the starters starting the fourth quarter, Kristian, you don't see that from Mike Brown too often. What did you make of that? And obviously the results were what they were, but you don't see that from him that often.
No, we typically see him stagger these lineups, right? And that's something that we saw going back to last season when, Tom Thibodeau came to the realization, hey, putting Jaylen and Cat on the floor under pressure, we're giving ourselves an opening for other teams on the defensive end. This time he rides his guys, right? He rides his starters with Jaylen and Cat out there. And, I think that's what we have to see. I think we're starting to see them play a little bit more of that two-man game a little bit, where you see them a little more of the give and go with Jaylen and Cat, and you see them trying to figure out how they can get each other going while they're on the floor together. I'd like to see more of that. And I also think some of it is, hey, you didn't have Mitch available. But I think it's promising. Granted, we're probably going to get into the Cat field goal attempt conversation at some point. I think they have to find ways to get him going. I think you're starting to see him finding ways to get himself going that's not scoring related. I mean, at one point he had 17 points, 17 rebounds on the night. So, I think they kind of have to do that in games where Mitch isn't going to be there. We asked Mike ahead of the game about that, and he said, hey, we're going to see Ariel Hukporti play some minutes. We might see Jeremy Sochan play some minutes at the 5. Without Mitch, the 5 is a completely different beast for this team, and I think we saw that down the stretch where you got to go with Cat in that lineup. So I think it's promising, though. You want them to be on the floor. I think the best version of this team eventually is going to be having Jaylen and Cat on the floor at the same time. It's just a matter of finding how to get those guys to click. So we'll see. I liked it.
Look, I think that with Karl-Anthony Towns, there's always going to be a conversation, regardless of what happens. But, last night against OKC, you said it, Kristian, 17 points, I think 17 rebounds, 9 offensive rebounds. And I thought that he played fantastic. I don't think he tried to do too much on offense. It seems like he slid right in there. I don't know how realistic it is to expect that from an All-NBA player. Consistently, for him to settle for the 9 shots that he took and to kind of slide in at the number 3 role, it seemed like to me, behind OG Anunoby. And so, yeah, it was interesting. And you saw kind of similarly against San Antonio, he played really well and kind of within the offense. And maybe that's the formula. Again, I don't know if it's even realistic to think that it could be followed. But John, your thoughts on Towns last night and kind of the hierarchy there?
Well, I mean, you say 9 shots, and a bunch of those were on, no pun intended, on putbacks after he got offensive rebounds.
Ding, ding, ding.
So, yeah, it's not even like a real 9. Look, I think part of the conversation, you kind of allude to it. How realistic is it or is it to expect Towns to be, whatever word you want to use, comfortable with that, accepting of that? I'd look at it from just the perspective of, are you making the best use of your All-NBA caliber center? And we know he wasn't All-NBA because of his defense, by having him be just a, kind of a garbage man on the offensive end. And, I don't even want to call him a decoy, but like, drawing attention, his spacing, the whole thing, like that stuff is all great. And I think it is necessary, and it is leading to winning basketball. And I was incredibly impressed with how well he defended, not only last night, but really since the All-Star break. I think that was maybe the most encouraging part of last night. But I just cannot believe for the life of me that if you're a Knicks team trying to maximize your offensive output, that formula includes Karl-Anthony Towns taking 0 3-pointers. Like, there has to be a way to spring him for some looks, to say nothing of, like, we've seen them do a good job lately of getting him going downhill where it's not him initiating the drive, because we know that doesn't always go so well, but kind of getting him started, getting him the ball as he's already on the move. More stuff like that. Again, I realize this was OKC. I realize there was no defense as good as them. So it's like the highest bar to clear. But I do think that that's something that we should keep our eye on for the rest of the season.
Yeah, and Kristian, you've heard Karl Towns all year, and I have too, just to talk about the idea that would he buy into fitting in there. Everything he said publicly has been about the team and about winning. He's talked about, obviously, trying to get used to the system. And I think he was just giving you an honest answer in whenever he was talking about how he was having trouble fitting in, not sure how he fit in. He was being candid. But most of this year, he's talked a lot about not caring about his role and just wanting to win basketball games. And so I just wanted to point that out because we were talking about the hierarchy there, guys. And do you think, Kristian, that does Towns need to be used differently than what we saw the last couple nights in order for the Knicks to go where they want to go?
That's a great question because we were having this conversation last year with Tom Thibodeau, right? Like, are the Knicks maximizing Karl-Anthony Towns under Tom Thibodeau? The answer was no then, and now it's regressed even worse, right? If we were complaining about touches and shot attempts last year, I mean, this is pretty much half. Cat is shooting what I think it's career low in terms of field goal attempts. His field goal percentage and 3-point percentage were down for most of the year. I'm sure they're still towards the career low in terms of where it's been since his rookie year. This is a guy who considers himself the best 3-point shooting big man pretty much of all time. And it's easy to back up that claim when he's on fire, when he's getting the shot attempts. He's not getting those shot attempts right now, but the Knicks are still on pace, to win 50 games again, to potentially get back to the Eastern Conference Finals, maybe one up themselves and get to the NBA Finals. So I understand what Kat is saying. He's not going to make it about himself. We've asked him about this, I don't know how many times, at least 10 to 12 times this year. Hey, what do you think about your shot attempts? What do you think about this? Where you're not averaging what you used to average. He's going to die on the hill of, hey, as long as we're winning, I'm going to do what it takes for us to win. That being said, there's just stylistic matchups that are begging for you to expose the mismatch or to take advantage of the mismatch that Cat has when these teams are guarding him with smaller guys that they're not doing. And then there's just also when you trade Julius and Dante for a guy that's making $50+ million a year, you would expect that you lean into his strong suits, right? You expect that this is a guy who's going to take 15 to 20 shots a game and not bat an eye. That hasn't necessarily been the case, but Jalen's shots are down in during this stretch and his assists are up, right? Other guys are having to sacrifice elsewhere on the team. So Cat's no different. It's just his is quite, on Front Street because this is a guy who's been used to averaging 20, 25 points a year. Now he's under 20. So we'll see what happens.
You got me thinking, Kristian. I would say you're probably about 7 total questions about the shots for Cat. I think I'm around 4 or 5. We throw Bondi in there. I think we're close to 20 at this point.
Yeah, definitely over 20 and a half. Definitely over 20 and a half shot attempt questions for Cat.
How about that stat? All right, we're going to hit a little soundbite here from Mike Brown. I thought this was interesting, what he was saying the other night. And so let's take a listen.
It just gradually happened, and I've said this before, that's what the regular season is about. You tinker with this, you tinker with that, you try to get a little bit better here, a little bit better than there, and then hopefully at the end of the season you're at a point where you're fairly comfortable and you can start trending upwards.
So, Mike Brown was talking about the defense there, and we'll definitely get into that. I just thought him talking about the regular season in that way was interesting because this is kind of what you've seen all year from Mike Brown, going to Landry Shamet, going to Mohamed Diawara, going to different combinations and seeing what works and what doesn't work. He said a lot before games, talking about wanting to go to a specific combination going into that night's game and talking to his stats guys about the numbers, and they'll say, these guys haven't played together yet. And so he hasn't been shy about that. Now, obviously it's going to work or it's not going to work based on what you see in May and June. But John, from that perspective, that process that he kind of referenced there with the regular season, are you appreciating that, or do you think that's a mistake?
I mean, it's interesting because the last coach, the guy that he replaced, talked about, the regular season as you build up habits. Like you build up habits starting in training camp and then through the regular season and ideally carry you all the way through the playoffs and until June. And you could say that Mike Brown is kind of espousing the same sorts of things, but he's also doing it differently in that I think there is maybe a little bit more experimentation going on. Your mutual colleague, Fred Katz, came on Knicks Film School, I think it was a week or two ago, and talked about, how they trotted out the zone defense against Miami earlier in the year without having practiced it, even once. Mike Brown will do stuff like that. I think we saw it even with Jeremy Sohan when they got him at first. He was throwing him out there with lineups where you were kind of scratching your head. But I think he sees the regular season as an opportunity not only to gather data, which is important, but also just to kind of get a feel for things. And the thing that I appreciate about Mike Brown and I really like about Mike Brown, and this, you could arguably draw a line between him and Tibbs on this one, is when he doesn't get a great feel for something or when something is not going maybe the way that he thought, and there are maybe dissenting voices, you think back to Josh Hart not starting the year as a starter, and he's been the starter ever since then. He doesn't seem to have, pride, I guess would be the word that comes to my mind when it comes to that stuff. Like if something needs to change, he seems willing to change it. I guess what I'm most interested in at this point is, does he have a specific vision for how the playoffs are going to look from a rotation standpoint, from a minute standpoint, all of those sorts of things. And we'll find out soon enough.
Yeah, it's interesting, John. You talked about, him being open to changing his mind. And remember, Kristian, I think we were both up there at practice when Jeremy Sohan signed. And I think Steph Bondi asked about how does this impact the rotation? And Mike Brown said, look, Mohamed Diawara has had a fantastic season, but I have played rookies over vets. But in this instance, I have to see what Jeremy can do. I have to kind of evaluate him in a short period of time. And then the next night, Mohamed Diawara is still in the rotation, still getting minutes. So, yeah, he seems very open to changing his mind. I don't know what that mind change was based on, but obviously Diawara playing very well in the minutes that he is given. And so it's just fascinating to see that he's open to it. Look, everything that we talk about now, just what happens in May and June, that's all that matters. So we'll look back at this stuff, and if they get to where they want to go, we'll talk about how well it worked. If they don't get to where they want to go and some combination doesn't fare well in a playoff series, we'll talk about how it was a mistake. But it's just interesting to see the process here, John. And you've been talking about it a lot, the defense. And I think defensively, you go back to beginning of February, they're right there near the top, if not at the top, defensive efficiency.
We could go back further to the ML, starting with actually the MLK Day game. It's a 21-game stretch. They're not only first in the league, but they're first by 3 points per 100 possessions. So that's a 21-game sample size. That's it's more than a quarter. It's a quarter of the season essentially.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. You talked about Karl Towns defending well. What do you make of the change? Like what we talked about the schematic stuff. Is it as simple as that? Or what are you seeing?
I mean, if you believe Mike Brown, it's something that has taken just the time with practice and getting used to stuff. I mean, you guys reported on Ian reported on how they were funneling middle, and then they made the change to kind of stop doing that. I think that's part of it. We've heard Mike Brown talk about simplifying things more in the context of the offense, but I wouldn't be surprised if there was some of that went on the defensive end as well. But like, I'm a big believer, as will surprise nobody who's listened to me before, in that a lot of defense is just effort and coming out with a certain approach every night. And I don't think I'm speaking out of turn by saying that there were a lot of nights earlier in the year where the Knicks, for whatever reason, we don't need to speculate on it, but did not come out with the sort of approach that we saw, for instance, last night against the Thunder or recently against the Spurs, or pick really most of the games that they have played over the last month and change. I don't know if that's the team, a veteran team, kind of saying, all right, we're getting closer to the playoffs. It's time to start ramping up. But for me, I always look, when I'm evaluating the defense, not only at the weakest spots, and I think Cat has gotten a lot better, and Jalen Brunson also very quietly has made himself at least a presence where for a lot of the year he wasn't even that, but also the top end. And when you have OG Anunoby defending like he's been defending lately, and then you slide in Mikal Bridges behind him, has had some great defensive games, and then Josh Hart, and everybody's kind of in their proper role and doing what they're supposed to do. Like, again, the Oklahoma City Thunder are not known for their offense, but they're still 7th in the league, I think, in offensive rating. So I thought the Knicks' performance against them last night was very, very encouraging, as it has been lately.
So this is not a fluke for you. It's not a statistical anomaly at this point. This is just what they can be and what they have been defensively. For me, it is. I mean, I think there are always things that can change. This goes for not only the defense, but for everything with this team. Like, they are not a team that I think could sustain an injury to any one of their top guys. Like, for instance, if OG Anunoby went down for a period of time, that would change everything. But I actually, this may be crazy, I think there's even maybe a slightly higher
level that they could get to. And the place that I would look for that is Mitchell Robinson. We've seen Mitchell Robinson have stints where he has resembled the all NBA or all defense level player he's been in the past. I don't think he's been quite that consistently, at least since the All-Star break. If they could get him to a point where he's defending at that level on a regular basis, and then you have your non-Towns lineups where Mitch is really your backstop, and you have kind of Jaylen running the offense. Like, I think it's very realistic to pin them as a top 5 defense, and I don't think that's being too optimistic.
I just want to hit quickly on last night. The officiating, Mike Brown gets teed up. Kristian referenced that potential third foul on Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, which certainly would have changed the tenor of the game to a degree. You had a lot to say about it on your show, Knicks Film School, the postgame, and on Twitter. And you use some not safe for this show language, so I'm going to ask you to censor yourself a little bit. But just your thoughts on the officiating there last night.
I have no problem with how SGA is officiated, because if we're keeping it a buck, if you have a problem with how SGA is officiated, then you're gonna have to have a problem with how Jalen Brunson's officiated and point to pretty much any ball dominant guard in the league. I mean, this is how the league is called. My issue specifically is that you as Tibbs always used to say, you just want it to be consistent. And last night, to me, did not feel consistent in the slightest. And the non-call on SGA, what should have been SGA's third foul, and I believe I saw a tweet from Steve Popper, another one of your colleagues, saying that he said it, that should have been the third foul. To not call that, because I mean, I just don't know why. It seemed like a pretty clear charge to me, but that's just me. And then the 2 reviews in the fourth quarter that were each kind of pivotal in their own way. The OG one, especially, if you're going to overturn that, maybe overturn it to a non-call, but to change that to an offensive foul, like we all saw the replays. I didn't see that. So it just seemed like it was one-sided. And look, this happens with the NBA sometimes. You're going to get games like this. Unfortunately, it's a problem that doesn't seem to be going away anytime soon.
Yeah, the interesting thing to me, taking the teams out of it, usually you think that you need to have pretty clear visual evidence that you got the call wrong in order to overturn it. The couple instances there where I don't think there was clear visual evidence and they still went back on the call, which, look, they obviously want to get it right. They're human beings. But it strikes me as strange when you see that. Like, normally you say, all right, that's enough where they can overturn it. A couple instances where I didn't see that last night. And so we're gonna transition now to a couple injury updates. Jalen Brunson, that lower body injury, left the floor in the third quarter, was in the back for a while, but came back and got back on the court and did what he did and knocked down those threes to get the game tied up. Had several assists in that stretch too. I think he finished with 13 assists. Maybe I'm off on that, but a very good assist to turnover ratio. Obviously, he's going to be fine. And Josh Hart with the back, you could really tell that he tweaked it and it was limiting him. And I don't think anybody caught up with him after the game. So that's something to keep an eye on as you go in this West Coast swing. And then, Miles McBride, we noted when surgery happened that it was a 6 to 8 week timetable. That was the belief. And then, shortly after that, I had kept hearing that there was, optimism and positivity about his rehab and how it was going, and the idea that it would fall within that range. And I haven't heard anything to date that leads me to think otherwise. I still think there's positivity there. I think that, things have been going well, and I don't think there's any reason to fret or to worry if you're a Knicks fan about Miles McBride not being back and being ready to go for the postseason. That's the trajectory that I've kind of heard about and talk to people about, and I haven't heard anything different than that. So I think things are going well there with the McBride rehab, and we'll see where that goes. But I think that's solid news, John, right, for the fan base and the organization. Who do you pull from the rotation though when he comes back?
I mean, that's a tough question. I mean, when you bring up McBride and the thing, I mean, look, McBride brings so many intangibles. You look at all the lineup data from the last few years, obviously, his own point of attack defense. I know Alvarado was kind of brought in to fill that role, but McBride helps them in so many ways. But just like a really specific thing, he is their best and most consistent above the break 3-point shooter. And you look at this team, it's actually funny. Every player on the roster, more or less, is shooting, or who actually shoots threes, is shooting above 40% from the corners, which makes sense because they're the best corner 3-point shooting team in the league. But where they do tend to run into issues, and some of their more voluminous 3-point shooters are not as good above the break, that's McBride's specialty. He's above 40% from above the break. And I think in that very specific way, he helps with your spacing in a way that they don't, again, quite have with him out of there. I mean, Mohamed Diawara, there is not anyone out there in Knicks Nation, I promise you, that is higher on Mohamed Diawara's potential than I am. I love seeing him out there. I love what he's able to do. He has absolutely helped this team win basketball games this year. Put aside what he might be a year or two from now. I would just have a little bit of a little bit of caution for anybody who thinks that he's just going to be able to continue to get these like 12, 13 minutes a game, because those minutes are just not there to be had if you're going to go out there, if you're going to play Alvarado and McBride and Shamet. And I just don't see where else you go. So what I think probably makes the most sense, you give Diawara maybe 2, 3, 4 minutes, maybe first half, just to get him out there and kind of give one of your bigger wings a little breather. But if I'm looking at where the minutes coming from, probably a little bit from, a couple of your starters. And then I'm getting the rest of them probably from Diawara.
Yeah, certainly interesting decisions to make when you get there, if you get there. But so far, just positive stuff out of the McBride rehab. Let's get into the East, John. Big news today. Jayson Tatum questionable for Friday's game. We all knew he was coming back, and it just seems like we have a timeline at this point. And I don't know, we've talked a lot about the Pistons, how strong they are, and we've all had an idea that Tatum was going to come back at some point. Something I found interesting, a couple Western Conference vets who were around New York lately, they were saying that they were saying, look, the Knicks, they were asked, I guess, about the East in general. The idea that, hey, maybe it's a finals matchup here. A couple of those vets were saying, what about Boston? I mean, can you get through Boston? Boston's going to be really tough. So just to give you a little bit of an idea of what opponents feel like the Celtics are now and then can be with Jayson Tatum, those guys were talking about them as kind of the toughest out in the East from their view. And that was, a few weeks back. So it just intrigued me to hear how those guys viewed the Celtics, because we were talking a lot about the Pistons and hearing it from a player's point of view always kind of piques my interest. I'm just wondering, John, if you are kind of power ranking Knick opponents at the top of the division. Now we have Tatum coming back. What are your thoughts on kind of what will your power rankings be right now if you spun it forward to the last week of the season?
I would put Boston at number one. I would put them at number one in terms of the team that putting the Knicks aside, that out of them, Detroit and Cleveland, I would have as the most likely, threat to make the finals. And I think I would probably have them as the team that I don't want to say fear the most, but I would have the most trepidation in terms of my confidence level heading into that series. And a lot of Knicks fans obviously are going to point to last playoffs, and the Knicks beat the Celtics in 6 games. And you missed me with the revisionist history that the Celtics still had a chance to come back in Game 4. They did not. The Knicks were winning that game. They were going up 3-1, whether the Tatum injury happens or not. All that being said, those two teams played 24 quarters of playoff basketball last year, and I would say the Celtics pretty significantly outplayed the Knicks for more quarters than the Knicks outplayed the Celtics. Mm-hmm. The fourth quarters in games 1 and 2 obviously happened, and that's what decided those games. Knowing what I just have read and heard from Joe Mazzulla, I would bet that he will be able to use that series and those specific games as motivation for his team this year about, hey, we let a golden opportunity slip away. We owe them. And so you're talking about a team that is not only good, that is not only probably the best coach team out of the contenders in the NBA this year, but a team that is going to feel like, that was their series to win and they let it get away. I think that would be an absolute war if the Knicks face the Celtics in the playoffs. And I absolutely think that, it's not crazy to think that Boston could emerge, victorious, but I do still think at the end of the day, with the changes that the Celtics made over the summer for cap reasons, I think the Knicks have more talent. It's about putting that talent together and making it work for you in the way you need to.
It's really remarkable. Just take yourself out of the rivalry, the New York-Boston rivalry, the Knicks-Celtic rivalry. Remarkable that team, in what was supposed to be kind of a gap year with Jayson Tatum out, has done what they've done, and now here we are with Tatum on the verge of returning. Karl-Anthony on his show, 7 p.m. in Brooklyn, he had a take on Jayson Tatum and Jaylen Brown, and he was saying that he thinks Tatum needs to be mature when he returns, knowing it's Jaylen Brown's team this season. And look, I'm not going to pretend to know the inner dynamics of that locker room, particularly between those two guys, but there's going to be an adjustment period. There's certainly going to be an adjustment period. And Jaylen Brown has played so well at such a high level at the usage that he's been at. Like, how do you wiggle Tatum in? It's not going to be easy. And I think that the mature, I think Jayson Tatum strikes me as a very mature player and somebody who's not going to be upset or pouting about anything now that he's back on the floor. But it's going to be a challenge. I mean, what do you make of getting Tatum back into what the Celtics have established, particularly Jaylen Brown?
To me, he is, when you talk about superstars in the league, and I do think he's a superstar, I think I would argue that he's as easy a plug and play guy when you look at the dynamic of the Celtics, because, even if he is nothing more than a floor spacer who can, attack closeouts and make the next pass and make the read. And then when Jaylen Brown's not in the game, he's your guy initiating offensive possessions. If that's all he's doing, and then being asked to defend at an apt level on the other end of the floor, like, what reason do we have to believe that he can't do those things? And I don't think we have a great reason. And the other part of it is, it's not like Jayson Tatum and Jaylen Brown got thrown together last year or the year before that. Like, these guys have spent their entire careers together. They know each other well, obviously. I think I would guess that there's a respect factor there. So again, it's not to say that the adjustment is necessarily going to be easy and that there aren't going to be bumps in the road. But if you're looking at, we have, it's March 5th. So we got another 5-6 weeks left before the playoffs start. Like, I think that's more than enough time for those guys to work out whatever kinks there might be, which, again, as a Knicks fan, is certainly something that I'm keeping an eye on.
Tatum, if he comes in and does kind of what you described, John, floor spacer, attack closeouts, defend, move the ball. I mean, that's the best connector at that position in the league. I think I can't see Tatum coming in and like demanding shots or like, creating issues behind the scenes. Those guys have won together. And so maybe, I know it's a narrative, but a little bit maybe overblown. And Tatum, if he slides right in there, I mean, good luck to the rest of the league. We do have Kristian Winfield, New York Daily News, back with us, hanging in with us. He is on his phone. Appreciate you jumping back in, Kristian. We were just talking about Tatum coming back and kind of power rankings for the Eastern Conference. With Tatum back, kind of spinning ahead to like the last week of the season, how would you rank those top teams in the conference in terms of Knick opponents?
Right now, I need to rank Verizon as the bottom of the barrel for internet providers, because we've got an outage in my neighborhood right now. I'm recording right now from my apartment. What is this, lobby? I don't even know what part of the the house this is, but no. So Tatum comes back. I think he's gonna have to obviously adjust to the team not being his anymore, right? Like this is Jaylen Brown's team now, and egos are a real thing. How does he adjust to that? We don't know. We don't know what that looks like. That being said, this is a team that's gone to the finals and won it before, right? So I expect that they've already done that checking ego for the greater good thing. So that's a team I'd be scared of, right? For the Knicks, I think number one is Detroit. You want to avoid them at all costs. Number two, you've beaten Boston in spurts this season, but they haven't had Tatum. And number three, I think the Cavs are for real, man. I think once they start to get the ball rolling, you're seeing James Harden play good ball. You're seeing the depth they added with Dennis Schroeder and Keon Ellis and Donovan Mitchell. Obviously, the jury is out on them in the playoffs between James Harden and Donovan Mitchell. I don't know. Number one, I don't think either of them have been to the NBA Finals since James went with OKC, right? And number two, those guys just don't do deep playoff runs in general. They're allergic to them. But they're overdue, right? They should be getting over the hump at some point. That's another team that I don't want to see if I'm the Knicks, but you're gonna have to go through all of them. Sure, why not? What didn't one of you guys say? Draw Detroit, do 1-4, get Detroit in the second round, and get it out of the way, right? Just rip the Band-Aid off, go for it, right?
Yeah, a lot of interesting permutations there with the standings and how it's all going to shake out. Kristian, we were talking about Miles McBride and how things kind of there's been optimism around his rehab and that 6 to 8 week timetable. If you're Mike Brown, Miles McBride's fully ready to go. Is it as simple as Mohamed Diawara out of the rotation, Miles McBride in? Like, how do you handle that?
This is I guess when you think about it from this standpoint, you bring in Jose Alvarado to be able to play a lot of those Miles McBride minutes, right? And now you've kind of got two options at the same spot. I don't know that you can just remove Mohamed Diawara because Diawara brings the size, he brings athleticism, he brings somebody who can play above the rim. He's going to shoot the same number of threes as Deuce in the same amount of time. Bro shot, 13 threes in 14 minutes or something crazy like that. I think that it'll be situational, but I think Jose and the way he's played, the aggression, the speed that he's been bringing, he's just not scared of anything. Offensively, he's trying to get downhill, get to the rack. Defensively, he's just wreaking havoc all over the place. I think we start to see maybe a little bit more of that. I'd love to see a Jose Alvarado, Miles McBride, who else? OG Anunoby, Mohamed Diawara, Mitchell Robinson lineup. Like, now who's going to score on? So I don't know. I think for Mike, it's one of those things where it's a good problem to have. You can file it under that. But I don't know that you just remove Diawara and add McBride because Diawara's giving you 6'9" athleticism and still giving you that 3-point shot versus McBride. I think McBride's he's gonna need some rope, right? He's gonna need to ramp up and get his confidence back in his body. So we'll see. I think Jose is still gonna have a lot of those minutes even once Deuce gets back, and then it becomes situational from there. We'll see.
The one thing too, Kristian, we were talking about when you were out, and thank you, Verizon, is that the defense. I mean, is it an aberration to you what you've seen since as John mentioned, going back to I guess late January, mid-January? Is it an aberration, or is this what they are and what they will be defensively?
I think it depends on the opponent on the night, like we're seeing now that when this team is actually motivated and wants to play good basketball, they lock in and defend. But if they're not motivated, if they're just playing against, I don't know, the Indiana Pacers or the Utah Jazz, they tend to take their foot off the gas. So I think this is a team that can show us that they'll play good basketball, I guess, especially when it matters in the playoffs, right? But we saw what it looked like when they lost 9 of those 11 games and they weren't really motivated, right? We've seen what it looks like when this team isn't real, when this team is just in I guess we'll call it cruise control. I've gained confidence in this team's ability to perform under pressure. So I think that what we've been able to see from them in these games recently has been, okay, well, if they're going to show up and play this type of defense, well, this is the new standard that we're going to be able to hold them to come playoff time. But I'm not going to delude myself into thinking that this is going to be in every, even though it's been pretty consistent for a month now. It's only a matter of time. What does coaches say? It's the ebb and flow of the season. Mike Brown likes to say sometimes we're going to be up here, sometimes we're going to be down here. We don't want to stay down here too long. I assume at some point there's going to be some sort of regression, but I think they're proving to them. It's proof of concept, right? It's proof that, hey, we can play at this high of a level. Let's challenge ourselves to do it every night. So I don't know if it'll happen every night, but I think they're showing themselves that they can at least show up and try every night.
Kristian Winfield, New York Daily News. Really appreciate you coming back with us from your lobby and proof of concept. I just want to say quickly, Kristian is in the early stages of protein bar development be on the lookout for that. High rise is what he calls them. And he's given me a couple on press row, and man, they are very good, very good. So keep an eye out for that. And in addition to obviously Kristian's Knicks coverage every day in the New York Daily News. And with that, we're going to go to the Talkback section of the show where we hear from the audience, and we always welcome in my friend and yours, the big spend, Matthew Spenley. He's going to relay some thoughts from the audience, and we're going to get into it.
What's up, guys? I want to ask you about the seeding because Kristian alluded to it. I know you guys were talking a little pre-show about it. So, Ian, I want to start with you. The Knicks seeding, how the Eastern Conference will play out for the playoffs. Do you see an ideal spot for them? Where do you think they'll land? I want to just kind of broach that topic.
Yeah, where I go is the first round. And, Philadelphia, I think, is a tough out and will prove to be a tough out in the postseason. Toronto, I don't know. If I'm guessing, right, I think which series would the Knicks have an easier time coming through? I would guess Toronto. Obviously, it depends a lot on Joel Embiid's health. But just knowing Philadelphia and knowing how Tyrese Maxey in particular is so hard to slow down for the Knicks and the rest of the league, but certainly for the Knicks. Just thinking about that initial round is why I'm thinking Toronto would be the better matchup, and then you see where the bracket falls from there. But that's kind of where I sit with it.
John, what else you think on the seeding?
This is probably going to be a hot take, but why not? It's always good to get one out of there. The seeding shouldn't matter because if this team is going out there and playing like they're capable of playing, and I think we've been waiting for them to play like they've been capable of playing for like the entire year, we're seeing it now on defense, and we've seen it enough, I think, on offense to believe that it could be there over the course of a long series. Whether you got to face Detroit in the second round or the Eastern Conference Finals, whether you got to face Philly in the first round, Toronto in the first round, Boston, you got to go through them, whatever it is. Like the Knicks' worst enemy or their toughest opponent today is the same as their toughest opponent on the first day of the season, and that is who they see when they look in the mirror. So if they could just square all of their own, I don't want to say issues, but again, perform as they are capable of performing, it should not matter. Now, like, is there something with Detroit where Detroit just gives them a harder time than some of these other teams? Maybe. And yet, for the life of me, I'll stick by what I said before. I would fear Boston more than them. So it's not even like, we got to avoid Detroit until the conference finals. I think just go out there, play your game, let the chips fall where they may.
Kristian, you brought it up, but any other thoughts on the seeding, especially as it pertains to Detroit, Boston? I know we talked about the East, but what do you think?
I mean, whatever way the Knicks can avoid the Detroit Pistons is the way I want them to take. The Knicks haven't been able to have anything. We're talking about 37, 31, and then 15 without Isaiah Stewart or Jalen Duren, or whatever way that is, whether that's staying 2-3, whether that's dropping down to 5, I don't know what it is, 6, wherever it is for the Knicks not to draw the Pistons until the Eastern Conference Finals, that's where I want to see them. Other than that, I don't think the Knicks have any worries in the East. Granted, I brought up Cleveland, I brought up Boston. I think at the end of the day, the Knicks are better teams than that. But if you're telling me that they end up the 4th seed and now they have to play Detroit in the second round, I think that's a recipe for disaster. So whatever way they can stay away from the Pistons.
I agree with what you guys have said about Tatum. I think he'll be coming back and happy to accept any role. I just think, we'd be naive to think it's not going to change a lot about the team, even if they're all kind of willing to line up. So I'm just a little more skeptical that Boston, that he'll come back and they'll just be able to keep rolling. But we'll see. We know that they're super formidable in the playoffs. I want to talk just a little bit about Cat, guys. John, I got to start with you because you're certainly never shy to share your opinions about Karl-Anthony Towns. How he's played recently. He was great last night before fouling out. I got to get your take on how Cat's played recently defensively and his all-around game.
Awesome. He's been fantastic. Any criticisms that I think you could levy towards Karl-Anthony Towns in terms of his recent his recent output, let me choose my words carefully here, should not be levied at him. I think there are still things the Knicks and the coaching staff and his teammates can do to get him, not to use the overused term, but like more involved in the offense, but just, get him shots in spaces on the floor where he's more likely to make them. Get him some more threes. Like the one troubling thing I think that and I kind of referenced it before, is just the 3-point shot has not been there enough for him. And again, I'm not putting all the blame on everybody else other than him, but I think he is giving them so much right now, and he is doing seemingly everything that they are asking of him to do. So now, if anything, it's just on them to see if they can, tap into a little bit more of the stuff that makes him special. But I can't say enough about Cat. I think he's been, he's probably been their best player since the All-Star break.
Yeah, I think you said how I feel too. Sometimes I think we get a little caught up. A guy like Cat that's been in the league for 10 years, I think we spend some time talking about the type of player he is. Can he change? Can he adapt? He is the type of player he is. Has to be deployed in the right way. Kristian, what do you think about how Cat's played recently?
I think it's, selflessness defined, right? I think it's a guy who's understanding that he can't put his wants ahead of the greater good for the team. This is a guy, as I mentioned, who has several seasons scoring over 22, 23, 24 points per game, several seasons shooting 5+ threes a game, several seasons being one of that, bona fide second options behind, whether it's Anthony Edwards or Jimmy Butler or whoever he's been teamed up with over the years. And now it's kind of like his production is situational. Who would have thought you trade two key players to get this guy whose salary in itself suggests he's a franchise cornerstone level player, and he's barely taking 10 shots a game. Who would have thought that would be the case? But that just goes back to what we mentioned earlier about the level of sacrifice, that the level of buy-in that everyone has to have if you're going to meet the common goal, right? So sure, do we want to see Cat going out there and shooting 10 threes a game? Yeah, I made a joke yesterday. Look, well, I wonder what would happen if Cat had Mohamed Diawar's shot profile, right? It's not going to happen. Defenses treat Cat one way and treat Diawara another way. I'm interested to see what happens when maybe defenses start forcing the Knicks, hey, run offense through Cat and beat us that way, right? Are the Knicks prepared to do that? That's what I want to know. So we'll see. I think it works as long as they're winning, but I think as soon as they hit some adversity, anything's liable to come up. So we'll see.
I loved on Sunday when Mike Brown laughed when he was told how many threes Diawara shot. He's like, oh, yeah, okay, all right. Ian, finally, you on Cat before you guys get into your final thoughts.
Yeah, I don't want to oversimplify it, but the way I look at it is who is underneath Jalen Brunson in terms of the hierarchy of the offense? Is it Karl-Anthony Towns or is it OG Anunoby? It seems to me that Mikal Bridges has comfortably slid into that more tertiary role. But with Towns and Anunoby, that's where I go with it. Is where are you better off as a team? I don't know the answer. But I think, Karl Towns, to his credit, has, looking at that San Antonio game and the OKC game, has found a way to really impact the game without taking a ton of shots. Is it viable going forward? I don't know. But that's how I look at it. Who's the two? Who's the three? Is it Anunoby? Is it Towns? Or is it Bridges? And so that's what I'm keeping an eye on.
That's what I got. Thanks, boys.
Thank you, Matthew. All right, final thoughts, fellas. John, for you, as we sit here day after the OKC loss at home, scale of 1 to 10, 10 being highly confident, what's your confidence level that this team can get through the East and make the NBA Finals?
I mean, my confidence level is a 10 that they can get through the East and make the NBA Finals. It will. Oh, boy. I'm probably at around a 5 right now, give or take 1 to go to 4 or maybe to go to 6, depending on how I'm feeling at the particular hour. Here's what I believe. I believe that when the Knicks, and I said this last night after the Thunder game, I believe that when the Knicks play their game as they're capable of playing it, and if they do it, every game in a series for however many series they are the best team in the East, and they will get through whoever they face. Whether that's the Pistons, the Celtics, the Cavs, it doesn't matter. If they're healthy, health is a big thing for them. If they're healthy and they play their game, they will get through the East. So why am I at a 5 or so as opposed to a 10? It's because I think to write off their inconsistency completely because they have looked pretty good of late, I think is just ignoring a little bit too much of what we have seen as part of this team's DNA, not only over the course of the season, but during the playoffs last year. I've spoken about it many times on Knicks Film School. I did not think they played particularly well at all in the Detroit series. And then I said what I said about Boston before, where I think the Celtics outplayed them for more quarters than they outplayed the Celtics. And then we know what happened against Indiana. So that's why I'm at about a 5. I will say, if they keep up something close to this level of play, which I don't know how realistic that is, but more or less around this level of play from now until the end of the regular season and going into the playoffs, I would probably go a little higher. I'd probably go to like a 7 or an 8.
That's it. And we're going to leave it there, John. We can't thank you enough, man, for your time, for your thoughts, your analysis. If you're watching this, you know where to find John. But Knicks Film School does a newsletter, ton of shows, some great X's and O's, and just fantastic, top to bottom over there at Knicks Film School. So subscribe if you have not subscribed already. Kristian Winfield, unfortunately, we lost him due to an internet outage, but appreciate him coming on too. New York Daily News, check out his coverage every day there. Does a great job. That'll do it for us on the Putback, but we will be back with you guys pretty soon, talking Knicks, talking the rest of the NBA, and looking ahead to the playoffs.